beings do need shepherding that is fit for human beings. Sheep don't ask very much. So long as you give them a patch of grass, they will graze contentedly. But human beings left to themselves can be dafter than sheep, much dafter than sheep. And we can carelessly destroy one another and the world we live in. So we do need shepherding, good shepherding. And the reading today from John chapter 10 highlights some essential elements of good human shepherding. And Jesus directly invites us to let him be our good shepherd. So we'll hear the reading, please, from Hilary.
John chapter 10. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have the power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. Thanks be to God.
Thank you. Now we're going to hear a video of a song that probably many of us know from long ago, which fits today's theme. A shepherd is one who has wisdom and power, and so is able to care effectively and appropriately. A shepherd is one who loves and respects those in her care. A shepherd is known and trusted by his sheep. A shepherd is one who gives himself to serving others, even at cost to himself. We need shepherding, and the shepherd needs to be good. It is possible, even easy, for shepherds to turn out to be not so good, certainly not good enough. There are wolves in society. There are rampantly hostile people and forces that are out to get past the shepherd and make a meal of the sheep. Sometimes there are people who will ring up and offer to help you because they say your bank account is in trouble and they can solve it. And you know they are wolves. We call them scammers, and you put the phone down. I hope you do. And you think there are wolves, if you've been following the story this last week of the post office scandal and all those hundreds of poor sub-postmasters and mistresses who have been robbed of money and lives by the behaviour of the post office and the law for that matter, they've been up against the wolves rampant in our society. So there are wolves around, and it's no good pretending we live in a world without wolves. And there are hirelings, hired people. I like the old-fashioned word hirelings. This is the person who is hired to look after the sheep. He may care for them, but it's within the limits of his job description and what he is paid for. He is not paid to risk his life. His health and safety come first. He will help the sheep as long as it doesn't endanger him, as long as it doesn't ask too much of him, and he decides what is too much. And when the wolves appear, he says, "Oh dear, the wolves frighten me. I will run away. After all, it's only sheep that I'm deserting." In everyday life, in the home or in the work or with friends, we may get quite tired out doing what love calls us to do. And then we easily think, "I've done enough. I want a rest. I'm knocking off." Yet there are still things that need doing, still a mile to go, still people to be helped. Do we excuse ourselves? "I've done my share"? What do we lose when we live within the hireling's limits? If ever we do more than we're obliged to do, we give a sign of generosity and courage, which will lighten up the whole place for other people. We certainly know it from the other side. When we see people going the second mile, putting themselves out for us, we're not only grateful for what they do, but we are gladdened by being given a glimpse of a free, generous, living spirit in the world. Miserable limits, one might say. Of course, the hireling has not necessarily been very well treated. He's not in an easy position. He doesn't own the sheep. He works for the owner. The sheep are somebody else's investment, somebody else's profit, somebody else's pride. Owners have a stronger attachment to the sheep than the hireling. When you own something, when it is yours, it bonds with your identity, with your sense of your own value as a person. You care for it more intensely. But suppose a hireling saved up and bought his own flock. That would not inevitably change him into being a good shepherd. His hireling soul might not change. "I have the sheep," he could say. "I can use them for my profit. I will keep them from the wolves so that I might send them to the butcher. They will pay for my comfortable life and status." Good shepherding, as Jesus gives it to us, is in quite a different league. You might say Jesus is not playing the same game as these hirelings and these owners with the hireling soul. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He doesn't live in luxury in his big house in heaven and leave the sheep to live dangerously, get lost and die. The good shepherd loves the whole flock and won't rest when just 1 out of 100 gets lost. A wastage rate of 1% is not acceptable to him. Jesus is not a hard, practical business person. The good shepherd says, "The sheep are my own." He says to his disciples, "You are my own." But he does not say, "I can do what I like with my own." That is the basic position of untamed capitalism. The good shepherd says, "The sheep are my own, so I will give my life for them." He says, "The sheep are my own because I give my life for the sheep." I don't throw my life away for no purpose, But when the sheep can only be helped if I risk my life and get wounded fatally, then I will give my life. That's how Jesus lived. And it wasn't just by being killed at the end, but by living his whole life for others. He was giving his life for others, for the sheep. We read in 1 John, in the first letter of John, chapter 3, verse 16, we know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. I like to understand that laying down our lives for one another as laying out our lives for one another. It's not only on the final unrepeatable day of death that we can lay down our life for others, but every day we have some chance to serve, even though it's just in little things, a cup of cold water. It's a laying out of our lives for others, following Jesus. Jesus will be our shepherd if we let him lead us in green pastures and through the valley of the shadow of death. But Jesus does not look after us as though we were daft sheep. He will never reduce us in that way. He looks after us as human beings, the human beings we are, and he calls us to be fully human. And that means not living for ourselves, but for God and others. Jesus seeks others to share with him in the shepherding of the earth and all that is in it, of caring for other creatures and for caring for the potentiality of the earth that we can search out and make use of through arts and sciences and all the like. Jesus seeks for others to shepherd with him. He doesn't want us just to be shepherded in a passive way. So you remember Jesus, when he met Peter after the resurrection, he has a conversation with Peter and he asks Peter 3 times, do you love me? And Peter says yes with more and more vehemence. And each time Jesus gives basically the same answer. Feed my sheep. Peter joins Jesus in shepherding, loving others and living for them. And good shepherds with Jesus measure the achievement of their lives by the well-being of others, not by what they get for themselves. They give their lives. They don't keep their lives for themselves as though we're misers.